We're doing it live.
Not really, because it takes forever.
Zoom is such a nightmare.
What is that? Music in the
That's a
background.
video.
Oh, yeah, does a show upstairs.
Oh, I have, yeah, I'm like, doing it live.
Not really, because it takes forever. I forgot. Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
We are trying to figure out our lives. We're so sorry that we're running late. Oh, hi.
Hi.
Okay. I think, did we figure it out? My audience. Okay, so we also have transcriptions available if anyone is having a hard time hearing what's happening. I'm trying to, everyone in the meeting. Here is the link to the transcriptions. All right, Kara, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, God, the most simple part of this, right? And I'm like completely drawing a blank. My name is Mary Henderson. I am the residency director at Da Vinci Art Alliance. I'm also the former co-director of Tiger Strikes Asteroid. We are now a fully anarchic, non-hierarchical institution. And I also do some consulting work for mural arts. I wear many, many hats, and I teach painting in Philadelphia. So,
All right,
those are my things.
Hi, I'm Kara M. Shinda. I am the fellowship director, and I'm also a visual artist. I've been exhibiting since 2013. A little bit about me is I have a background in anthropology, and I'm really hoping to bring more of that social scientific background into my work this year, especially. And in addition, I'm also a member of Tiger Strikes Asteroid, a former member of Philadelphia Collage Works, where many of members are also in DV and at Da Vinci as well. So I'd like to say hello to all of the Philadelphia Collage Works members. And yeah, I'm just excited to be doing this with you all.
And my name is Brian Kirsch. I am one of two co-directors at Da Vinci Art Alliance. And I guess I'm a painter and perhaps a new media artist. We'll find out.
I'm not on camera.
You're on this camera behind me.
I don't know if it's showing on YouTube though. Hi, I'm Sam. What do I do? I'm also one of the co-directors here. I'm not on screen. We're still figuring out live streaming. I am also an artist. I worked as an artist assistant for 7 years, going on 7 years, as well as now being here for almost a year. Yeah, between the four of us, we have a lot of experience in writing CVs and artist statements and artist bios, which is what we're here today to gather and discuss.
We have you're the keeper of the agenda.
Oh, I am? Okay, yes, all right. Let's see.
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
That's okay.
Not the first time, and will not be the last.
Introduction.
Yeah, the first one was introductions for those who are attending. If you would like to say a few words about yourself.
Yeah, so we are almost entirely virtual at the moment. So all those folks who are on the Zoom call in there, if you are a fellow or a resident or a Da Vinci member or just a member of the public who's just really interested in doing a bit of writing and you're an artist, welcome, hello. And if you care to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, you are more than welcome to at this time.
I guess I'll get started. Okay. My name's Nashay Jones. I'm a digital artist. I'm a painter. I'm starting to work in augmented reality and video. I'm doing some experiments with that now. And I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. But I am the June 2022 resident at the Da Vinci Art Alliance. I've been a member since 2020, and I'm also a recent graduate of the University of the Arts. I received a Master of Arts in Museum Studies from there, and I am excited because it's been announced that we'll have the classes of 2020 and 2021 will have an in-person graduation after all. So I'm still very excited about that, and I'm ready. I'm trying to figure out when I'm gonna take my cap and gown to the dry cleaners, because unfortunately I did make a mess last time I wore it, but I'm just excited that it's gonna happen.
Great to have you here.
We just had a bunch of people walk into the room. So we may restructure in a little bit. Basically, we are doing a hybrid event. So these are our friends that are online gathering with us to learn about writing for artists. And then there are people that just joined in here that are learning about this. So maybe it would make sense for you guys to flip around.
Sounds good.
And we'll
I got
switch to
this
that camera. And
You want this, or do you want it still facing everybody?
what?
You want this camera facing us or facing audience?
I thought you guys will be talking about how to do it. Sorry, everyone.
I like how this sculpture is also
Our site religious icon.
We cut off a little bit into introductions, but we were just allowing anyone who wanted to introduce themselves, because this is going to turn very quickly into not a lecture and into more of a discussion and ask some questions about writing, about a variety of things. You're more than welcome to do so, as well as the folks online who are in that camera over there.
Turning this back on. Okay. So, if anyone else wants to introduce themselves now. Sorry for that disruption.
We also gonna just let people lurk if they would prefer not to.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the rest of your agenda there?
All right, just kind of discuss why we're having these creative conversations and some of the topics that people are interested in talking about. So, so one of the interests why we're having this first one is there was some interest from artists about writing, especially writing for yourself as a creative. So we'll talk a little bit about, the function of my Washington. It's not that, I guess, formal, but why our artist statements are important, why writing as an artist is important, and also talk a little bit about the artist CV and how that can work for you, and also writing a bio statement, because a bio statement is slightly different than an artist statement. And so hopefully we'll get the chance to do a little Q&A with one another to help us generate ideas to write an artist statement.
That's great. And when you talk about writing, are we discussing also a little bit writing as an artist in the sense in my practice, beside writing the artist statement, but writing as something that goes alongside my creation of X or Y.
Yeah, we can certainly talk about that, because I feel as an artist, for me, what's helpful is when I'm viewing other artists' work and being able to describe it as well. So art analysis, I think, is really a good tool to have with creative writing. Because once you start to write more and more about your own process, and you get to have a deeper understanding of other people's processes as well. And so I think that we can definitely talk about,
So let me reflect one of your own questions back to you is, what is the importance of writing an artist statement? Or rather, can you define an artist statement for us, just to get us on the kind of language base here?
Yeah, so an artist statement, you'll have to use these for whatever you apply to. Not just to grants, but also if you have an artist website, you'll want to have a description that clearly tells people what you do and why you're unique as an artist and why your particular type of art is important. And so your artist statement will function for different things. And it'll never be kind of finalized. It's something that'll be like a working document that you want to update over time. And what was the other part of the question for that?
Well, I'll ask, let's get on the same base of what is an artist statement.
Right, the artist statement, right.
And then why it's important, so that was a two-pronged question that I reflected back at you. So how do we feel about that? What we haven't talked about is how and when they're used, and especially in terms of what you talk about when you write them. Let's kind of break that apart a bit. So when do you need an artist statement, I suppose?
Yeah, so you wanna go?
Sure, I mean, you need it for almost anything that you're applying to, or, anytime that you're presenting your work in a non-face-to-face way. I think that different institutions that you might interact with will have kind of different requirements for artist statements. There's certainly there's some, commercial galleries, for instance, who, are really going to prefer that they want the context of the artist statement to read the work, but they're not going to, just use your artist statement as is in a press release. So some gallerists will want to do more of the writing themselves. Some will rely more on the writing of the artist. I think it, varies from place to place. From my perspective, and this is something that I definitely don't always apply as well as I should in my own work and sending stuff out. When I read a lot of artist statements, working with a nonprofit gallery, and I think it's difficult to understand how little a viewer is able to glean just from looking at images, looking at images on a computer screen. The first question that comes to my mind whenever I'm doing any sort of a curricular capacity is what am I looking at? And it can feel so clear in your own mind, well, obviously these are large scale paintings, but there's no, so many of those cues are gone. And so some of the, some really obvious things that you think would be very clear to the viewer are worth pointing out or re-emphasizing. I'm going off on a tangent, starting to think about, crazy art statements that I've read, but.
I do want to come back to that.
Yeah.
So let's kind of from the top here, think about things that we definitely want to have in an artist statement.
Yeah.
Clearly, you're already talking about answering the question, what are we, for someone who is reading this artist statement, looking at? Because we're probably going to be either looking at the arts in real life, if you picked up a handout that has an artist statement if you're inside the gallery, Or if you are a juror and you are looking at an application for all number of things, and you are looking at JPEGs or a video on a computer, really just kind of defining what your artwork is, it sounds like, and then perhaps maybe process how this thing came into existence. Might that be another thing that you would tackle in an artist statement?
The best piece of advice that I've ever gotten about writing an artist statement was from a gallerist, who said, I want to know what this is. So, this is a series of paintings, which, even that might not be clear, right? I want to know why you're making it. I want to know why you're making it. And I want to know how you made it. And if you cover all those things, you have a pretty coherent artist statement. So how you made it, people want to understand your process. They want to understand if this is something that's really digital or if it's something that you made by hand and digitized. They want to know, if you're painting over photographs or if you're painting from photographs. They want to know if you, made the chain links by hand or if it's something that was ready-made that you purchased. So all of those pieces of process that may feel like they're self-explanatory or actually really helpful in providing context.
I really enjoyed the kind of three kind of questions that, were baseline needing to answer. The why you, and how. I've heard this question a few times, so I want to kind of talk about here is there a structure that makes sense to order some of those answers? Here is first paragraph, I describe what it is, and then do I launch process, or should I answer these other questions in a different order? Have you seen any success in a particular structure in artist statements, or is it as long as you cover all the bases, you're fine?
What do you think, Sarah? I feel like I've seen successful artist statements that, that started out biographically, if that's particularly of importance to the work. If you're doing any kind of work that's about identity, it can be helpful to, provide some context right off the bat. But I've also seen, very journalistic, like, this is what this is how, this is why, thank you very much.
Right, yeah, I would agree with that. So I've seen a combination of different, listing those details in various ways. I would say that the first thing though is to make your first sentence kind of be like, to be like attention grabbing, I guess, if I don't know. I mean, at least for me, that's what I aim for. It's like, and I haven't updated my artist statement in a while, but I think an artist statement can start with a good, like, a descriptive, attention grabbing, like, sentence or two. But as far as like, like Mary said, if your work is focused mainly on identity, it is a good idea to mention who you are, right? And how, your identity informs your work. And you can also, mention the process and the materials that you use. So.
Can I add to that too?
Yeah.
I feel like I have read a lot of artist statements that repeat the same thing over and over again. Where it's like, it's okay to have an artist statement that is 3 sentences long if it means you're not just repeating yourself in different ways, because no one cares. Like, you care, and I hope other people care, but like, when people are going through applications, they don't. They just want to understand your work.
Yeah, I can see, so I teach, I teach. So whenever I feel like applications, like I look for application for jobs, it's like, no, don't give me again. I'm very interested in that, no. So you just, so there has to be that grabbing. Can I ask you something? You are making a subtle distinction between the why I'm making this and the why I am making this, right? Can you say something more about it?
Yeah. So why I'm making this, I'm interested in, yeah, of course I'm drawing a blank.
Well, what do you
on
do?
something I
Let's-
can-
Let's
So-
use yourself as an example.
Yeah, so I'm interested in, how people comport themselves in public and kind of, spontaneous interactions that we can encounter when we're in, public places with lots of people. I don't have a particularly important answer to why I'm interested. The reason that I bring that up is that, like, I think from a curatorial perspective, particularly if your work investigates identity in any way, or if you're, working with culturally specific techniques, it is very useful for a curator to know that you know your way around that stuff, that you have some insight into, a practice or a community that's coming into your work. If you're looking at, a series of portraits and they all seem to be, of a certain group, and then you find out that the person who is making those portraits is from a different group, as a curator, you're like, is this, like, maybe this is not okay. I want to know, like where this person is coming from in taking this subject on, and maybe there's a really great reason, or maybe they're a creep, so it's like, helpful context for sure. I don't think it's always necessary. You don't have to justify why you're interested in something, but if that helps provide an explanatory framework for something that might not otherwise be clear, I think it's really useful, at least for me when I'm looking at artist statements, to know that, again, I'm not performing the group. I didn't mean to look at you when I said creep, by the way.
I didn't even catch that. Thank you.
I'm
Yeah.
not looking at creep.
Fair. I think what I've seen success is if, we're dealing with an artist that isn't rooting their artistic practice in like a strict identity. And it's a little bit more focused about the work, but you still kind of want to address that question a little bit. I've seen some success talking about the kind of you in that question, almost more of a process or a description of like how you arrived in these themes. So if, hi, my name is Brian, I'm the only artist who's from the moon, and I have decided that it's very important for me to explore extraterrestrial sculptures on Earth here in South Philadelphia, and I only use moon rocks. So that's why I make the work that I make, and it's important because the moon stuff. Yes, I'm not actually. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Thank you. Yeah, it
Okay.
does.
I mean, even all of that, like you're for our context, like when the exhibitions committee reviewed your proposal over the summer, like the contextual aspect of it being about your dad, I think really made it deeper, where it's like, I mean, personally, I think your work is beautiful, but like knowing that other element of like what you're processing and working through in your current body of work, I think that that's part of the purpose, right? Is to like provide those like extra hints where like, maybe that's what your practice is about right now, and that's what you're going to have your artist statement about. And then like a year from now, maybe you worked through it and you're not focused on that anymore. And then you revisit your artist statement and see what you're working on today and how that affects your entire body of work that you'd be applying to shows with. And I've seen that before too, in applications where like they try to have like as broad as possible of an artist statement, even when they're like working with a really specific narrative or like theme. And it's like, or you could just like, it'd probably be like more passionate and interesting if you just wrote about that theme that you're working on.
Yeah, sorry. So there is this tension, right? Because if you have a website and if you want to present yourself, you want to give something so broad that maybe that loses the interest because it's so broad. but then if you do an application, you can really be more honest about it.
Yeah,
But at the same time, maybe even the broader statement in the website should be revisited every month, every other month, so that it stays honest all the time.
I mean, I keep like a Post-it notepad next to my bed, because I feel like, we talk about this all the time, like the best thoughts always come in the shower or right as you're falling asleep.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's when my like artist statement, the 2 words will pop into my head. And I'm like, oh, that would be perfect. And then when I wake up the next day, I'm like, oh, that would have been perfect if I remembered it. So now I have like the Post-it pad for if I like don't feel lazy and actually want to like scribble something really quick. And I think those are the things you kind of like hold on to, are those like
Yeah.
random bits
Yeah.
of like good things that pop up.
I use the notes app on my phone, and just have, and sometimes I understand what seemed so smart to me 2 weeks ago, and sometimes I don't. It's a little bit like, keeping a dream journal.
Or if it felt particularly important to your practice to like start from, it needed to be in a broad sense, like, I'm Bryant, I'm a painter, but that work deals with the intersection of like art and technology. Done, but like, now here's what I'm working on. I'm like really kind of get specific into like, this is the project, this is the body of work that you are now looking at personally.
That's a really good point, and something that I want to sort of circle back to, which is that I think that just practically speaking, it can be helpful to have, you were talking about the broader statement and then the more specific statement. It can be helpful to have a sort of like enveloping thing that you can always use, especially if you work from body of work to body of work. And then kind of like, replace the specific project within. Obviously, you want to make sure that they connect. But you might have, like you said, like an overarching interest in, the architecture of decaying suburban malls. And that sustains you from year to year. And then perhaps, one project is a photographic project and one is a sculptural project, so having different versions, having, a structure that you can easily kind of insert specifics into where they're necessary, particularly for applications where they're saying like, what are you going to do when you're at this residency?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with this fellowship? Like, what is your project?
I also think it's good to hold on to old ones too. Like I still have the one I wrote in college that is terrible and has nothing to do with my art practice, because like I like looking back on
You're like behind me, I can't see.
I like looking back on that and like seeing how my practice has changed, but also has kind of stayed the same. I'm just looking at it in a different way. And sometimes that gives you insight, or like the like little tiny sentences where you're, or like micro fragments of sentences where like you forget that you wrote them 2 years ago, and then you look back and you're like, oh, that was a really good part that like I thought was bad, but now I want to bring it back.
Sometimes just turns a phrase, I'm like, how did I
Yeah.
used to know how to write stuff. Geez, what happened? One thing that I just wanted to circle back to that I was thinking and I didn't get to was the thing, the sort of question of like providing specific context, like personal context for your work. I think again, it can be super, super helpful. I would also say though, at least from my perspective in reading some of those, sometimes it can feel a little bit like, kind of jammed in a way that's not really relevant. So like, oh, I'm interested in the architecture of decaying suburban malls, and my mom used to take me to the mall sometimes, like if it's not really helpful, I don't think that trying to find a way to jam it in is necessary. I think like being honest and not trying to like game anybody or feeling like, oh, I have to check these boxes in order to make sure that I'm taken seriously. I think, it can feel forced.
And I think that can also like work in the inverse of it, is like if you need to add something in there that's like particularly relevant to you and that's important to that story. Like, I'm looking at the architecture of the decaying urban malls, and I was born in a Macy's.
Right.
That is now very relevant.
Exactly.
Okay,
So I would say it's like, if it's meaningful, like absolutely get, and if you're not sure, ask someone. Like, does this sound like I'm just, trying to bring in a sentimental personal story for the sake of, being sympathetic or appealing versus does this inform the work? And, you don't know, like, what's important. That's another thing we'll get to is the importance of talking to other people.
Should we talk about bios really quick?
Yeah.
We did prepare some like writing prompts for artist statements, but I feel like we should talk about like the more boring stuff first.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with artist bios?
Yeah, like, so an artist bio is like, it's similar to the artist statement, but in this document, you are talking about basically your background, like who you are. You can all chime in too, because I mean, this is at least with what I've done, like, and applying to different things and also reading things. Like where, I grew up or, what my interests are outside of just doing art, for example. So yeah, I guess I'm thinking here of like, for example, like, so for me, I came into art through anthropology and documentary photography. And so, so talking about that, how that kind of informs my practice. And yeah, I guess that's all I have for that.
Yeah, I asked you because I feel like you have a good bio that when I read it, I was like, wow.
Oh, you did? I haven't, like I said, this is helpful for me to have this creative conversation too, because again, like your artist statement is going to like, it'll just change over time. And so, yeah, I think so I mean, that's all I have to say about that. What a bio statement is, it can be anywhere from a paragraph to a page. Again, it depends on the context which you're applying to. I found a good thing to do is to like, and this can also be helpful when you go to write your CV, is just start writing, like just writing about yourself, where you're from, things that that you feel are important to mention to other people about how they can maybe better access or understand your artwork. And also there's kind of the other kind of things in there in bio statements, like, if you went to art school or if you took, if you received an award for your work, kind of nuts and bolts things too that you can include in there.
Yeah, thinking about sort of what, not my own bio, which is terrible, and now I'm listening to Kara, I'm like, I'm gonna call Kara tomorrow and make her her bio. But when I look at a bio, like on a jury or whatever, one thing that I'm looking for is like, is this an emerging artist? Is this a new career artist?
Yeah.
Is this like some super fancy person? Because, very often you have thoughts about, what balance in a group show, what balance you want of, emerging versus mid-career. Do you want younger people? Do you want older people? Like maybe you're thinking, I really want to make sure that it's not all like NMFAs in the show, because I want to have more of a diversity of backgrounds. And so those pieces of information, as boilerplate as they may feel, it's valuable info for someone who's trying to think holistically about programming. And wanting, I think sometimes it's kind of gross. Sometimes people are like, oh, well, you don't have an MFA,
Yeah.
And that sucks. There's not really that much to be done about people who bring that high to looking at work, unfortunately, unless you can think of.
I feel like that's like getting thrown out the window. Like, I feel like 10 years ago, there were a lot more things that when you applied to it, like when you actually looked at the specifications, it said like MFA required. And I don't really see that often anymore. There's like a handful of residencies
Elite
where I'm like,
residencies where they're like,
oh, like I want to go there so bad, but I'm never going to pursue an MFA. But yeah, I feel like a lot of that has like gone away, which is great.
Yeah.
Which leads, so that also, something else that you need to keep in mind, I guess, when you're writing your biographical statement, your artist statement, is the audience who you're writing for.
Yeah.
It can be helpful to find out, for example, like who is on, if you can find out that information, who are the jurors and, or who are the people who are selecting folks. It's okay to do, I mean, that's what I do research on them as well. And sometimes, this is a different topic, but sometimes I've applied to things and I'm like, no, this opportunity might not be for me because of something that they're looking for in particular. So,
Yeah, I said, well, we should talk about that more in the, whenever we talk about like applying to exhibitions, but I feel the same way, like there's that, again, we'll talk about more, but like there's that whole thing of like, oh, 1 out of 10 applications that you send out, you'll get like a positive response to. I'm like, I don't think that's true, because if you actually like do your research and look at the jurors or like the place you're applying to, like you usually know if you have a good shot or not. Like sometimes you have no idea, but a lot of applications you can like see other stuff.
But, I can say like for, Tiger Stripes Asteroid Open Call, like you have your chances, because it's a wide net, all
Yeah.
different kinds of work, you have like, it is significantly lower chances of getting into that than getting into Penn.
Yeah,
It's like, it's a crapshoot. So, and, that we encourage people like, it depends on the venue, but for a venue like that, where there's like kind of no doing your research because there, could be anything. Sometimes you just feel like find a liar, fix it,
yeah. I also, one of the things I was thinking about when you two were talking was, and like knowing your audience and stuff, is I realized when I got this job where like I couldn't use the bio that I had been using forever anymore. Because like now we have like job specific bios where like it's all about like what we do here or like how our practice influences what we do here. And there's like a little bit at the end of like, oh, we also do this. Like we also are artists and do this. So I think that's also something to put into thought is like, if you have a job that's also art related or something, like how, like, do you have different bios based on like what hat you're wearing at the time? And like my bio that I use for Da Vinci stuff is completely different than the bio I use in my own art practice. And it's
Same, yeah.
similar because like, it's like, we are who we are, wherever we are, but it's definitely different. But yeah, one of the things I don't think we said was that a bio is usually a summary of your CV. So it's like the like narrative version of your CV, kind of like filling in the gaps of like, okay, this is one line of, sorry, I just realized I haven't checked the chat in a while. It's like when you're looking at a CV, it's just like a one line. I graduated from Tyler with this major. But then in your bio, you can like flesh that out a little bit more, like talk about other projects you're working on there, talk about what your focus of your thesis was or whatever. Especially if you're just out of school or like haven't gone to school, but have like other experiences within the art world that you want to make more clear, because a CV only looks at these kind of like big ticket objects, not like your special, I mean, also that's another thing. My mind is going everywhere, but I do think you should have a special project line on your CV to talk about those things. But if you don't, the bio is a really good place to highlight like, oh, I also do like once a month get-togethers with my friends where we all collaborate on art together or something that you might not necessarily have in like a more academic like line item document. Which maybe we should talk about the line item document.
Sure, yeah, so starting that up top, you've got what, your name?
School name.
Take us away from there. What's the hierarchy of information? Thinking about this as an artist applying to either, an application proposal for an exhibition, or you need to provide it for a show that you're
So what's the hierarchy in that scenario then for you?
Number one, I think it's different for every artist, especially depending on where you are in your art practice. So like, I know older artists that don't have their education to like the bottom
Yeah.
because they graduated 50 years ago. So like, who cares?
Right.
But they do have like their teaching experience or other workshops or residencies like up at the top. For me personally, I have my name, education, residency / grants, and then I go into selected exhibitions. So whether it's like, I don't have that many solo shows, so I have mine mixed into all of my exhibitions, but I know you have a separate line for your solo shows. So, yeah, I mean, I think it just depends on the artist and like what you have going on. I usually advise people to never go over 2 pages unless they're asking for a full CD, because no one wants that. Like, I would be very upset if I had to print out a 12-page CD for someone who had like one painting in a show.
Right, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, unless you're like, for example, and also another thing I do is look at other artists' CVs and like, and statements too, to give me ideas. But for example, like last week I was looking at Howardina Pendel, who is, I believe, from Philadelphia, Black woman, abstract artist, still practicing her artwork. I believe she's in her 80s, and like her CV was like almost 20 pages long. But that makes sense because, you know, she's been practicing for that long, and so.
Yeah,
I think once you get to like, 20 years of practice, it's pretty hard to do it to
yeah.
which I won't say all the way up, but I think, I would, College Art Association has templates, for, an artist CV versus like an academic artist CV. And that's super useful in determining like which format you want when.
Yeah.
And that's CAA.
Yeah.
Oh, that's another thing too. If you are not like a teaching artist, but have helped other artists with like installing an exhibition or like helping them with a workshop as like a technical assistant or something, I think that that's really good to put on your CV too. In a lot of circumstances, or at least having it on your website CV, so people can have like a more well-rounded of like, oh, this is not just this artist doing this in their own like bedroom or something, like they're out there in the world assisting other artists and like being a part of a community practice.
Yeah.
So if you did that, where would you put that?
I would, for me, I put it at the bottom. But that also, like if I'm applying to a job, it's like further up,
You can do like a section called like, related experience.
Yeah.
If you, serve on, art centers, exhibitions committee, or you work, work as assistant or things like that, that are useful and interesting.
That also reminds me of professional affiliations. So
Yes.
like Da Vinci. It would be a professional affiliation. If you're a member of any art space or like a union or something, you can put that under professional affiliation. Yeah, there's also, now that you said the CCA blank, I forgot there's also, for artist statements, there's a website called iwriteartiststatements.com. And you can hire them to write your artist statement. They also run workshops, similar to the workshop we're in right now. But they have a prompt generator, or like, not a prompt generator, through prompts, they can generate a CD for you, or artist statement for you on their website. Which is a good lead-in to what we're about to do, which is I'm going to give you all prompts, where we're all going to give you prompts to write an artist statement. So, Mike, do you want a piece of paper? Susie, do you want a piece of paper?
Oh, notes.
Okay. Sorry. Everyone at home, get out a piece of paper. And this is kind of when I get stuck when I'm writing I mean, kind of just in general, I get stuck a lot because my brain moves faster than it should be. So I like to do mind dumps and just like start out with a basic question and write everything that comes into my head. And I think that that's a really great way of doing your artist statement, is kind of just like mind dumping onto a page, and then you can start pulling out like the good bits of information and compiling that into a paragraph. Do you want to start? I don't have it pulled up.
I know, I'm frantically trying to pull it up.
I have, what media do you work in? Or what media do you work
And for people at home, I'm going to put in the chat as well.
There we go, okay. Found it.
Yeah. let's go. Hello.
Hi.
All right, so hit us with this next one.
All right. What do you think about when you approach art making? So what do you think about when you approach art making?
I think we're still right. What do you think about when you just think of it? You want to just, I mean, I'll do these, but here.
Oh,
Okay, I'll do it, but you're doing great. This is what I'm trying to say.
Too much space here.
No, nobody is feeling impressed by it here. We're taking over this section, but also can you go these?
Well, these questions actually were generated by Sam.
Oh, these Sam wrote these.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm confused.
So it's all good.
Never mind.
So I'm actually might need a little help with translating this third one. It says, why is your media the tool you use to translate your thoughts into form? So,
Do you want to unpack that?
yeah.
Oh, you all unpack
Oh,
it.
dang, you did it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Some jujitsu.
kind of like I use Fiverr to translate the things that I see in the world into sculptural forms, and I use Fiverr processes because that's what I was trained to do from an early age, was using Fiverr processes. But that's kind of like I see the world as like lines that can connect together, and like I can do that in weaving and knitting, but like I could never use ceramic because I can't imagine like taking a blob of something and like carving it down. And like thinking about that was really impactful for me when I was trying to figure out why I make in the way that I make, or like why I use them, why am I a fiber artist? Or like, why do I use sculpture? That's where that question
Yeah,
came
for
from.
example, or why do I use, photography, in my artwork? So thinking about why you use certain types of art making processes.
Why do you use photography?
Because I feel like I'm really fascinated by. Put me on the spot there.
I'm sorry.
No, because I don't want to get into a deep philosophical thing, but it's I'm really fascinated by how you can capture a moment in time with photography. I always think of photography as you're writing with light. It's not just putting the shutter and all that, but you're creating this moment. Your interaction with someone else or a group of people, and so in that sense, for me, I use photography because I feel like it's a tool that lends itself well to ethnography, to writing about, how people live their lives day to day, or the types of activities that people do.
So how would you not answer this question?
Oh, that's such a good.
Oh, yeah.
I like painting. Maybe don't go with that.
Right.
Yeah, what would be like a really terrible answer for why painting? What would be my horrible answer for why?
I feel like I'm gonna volunteer painting as like the easy one to get wrong. Because I feel like a lot of people almost kind of fall into painting. Of course, they paint because that's what artists do. They paint.
Well, I think everyone else has to justify it all the
Exactly,
time
so
too.
yeah,
So it's like,
that's-
we think about it like, oh, why do I use fiber? Whereas a painter could just be like, yeah, I paint.
No.
Why don't you paint?
Yeah, it's why don't you? Yes.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I actually, it's, with my own personal artist statement, that particular thing, there's like it's always kind of coming in and out of the statement, partly depending on how long my artist statement is, but that like, oh, do I explain why I'm painting and sound like I have a chip on my shoulder? No, I'm gonna take that out. Okay, but I'm gonna put it back in because it's important. But no, then I sound like one of, like defensive, so it is, I think that like painting in particular that you brought up is a tough one because it feels like a default,
Yeah.
you know?
I feel like this is just my perspective as someone who doesn't paint at all. I feel like it's actually maybe easier with abstract painting because you can be like, oh, it's the quickness of the form or something. But like the two of you use like very detailed images in your work that take very long to make. And I feel like that might even be more difficult because you can't just like explain it away of like, oh, it's like me moving through the canvas as like my body.
But, some of the difficulty of writing an artist statement, if you come through a traditional academic background, particularly an MFA program, is like you're writing your artist statement and you're like, the audience in the back of your head is like your meanest critic. So you would come in and be like, why aren't these photographs? So you're like, oh, I have to explain why these aren't photographs because Professor so-and-so would always ask me and was never satisfied,
Yeah, that you just triggered me. Thank you.
I know. I can see like the look in your eyes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, I want to kind of stick on painting right now because it's such a difficult one to do in my mind, and especially for us as the kind of painters in this crew, especially the kind of realistic, almost masochistic painters
Right.
who torture themselves, is that I think about it in terms of why is painting the vehicle for this theme, which is just the rephrasing of Sam's original question, which is perfectly impossible. But, I think about it in terms of the theme for me is separate than the medium. The medium is the best way to get to that theme. And for me, the slowness of painting
Exactly.
is often required as opposed to the immediacy of digital media or the expediency of a digital photography or the complete staticness of painting is actually incredibly beneficial as opposed to the entire malleability of digital work. So I'm basically kind of defining my work and why I'm there by what it can do and what it can't do. And that's particularly relevant to my practice.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, the reason that I asked you about the photography thing was that, that question was like, why painting versus photography. To me, like what you were saying about the way that painting and photography approach the idea of time is very different. And I think that when I'm thinking about like why painting, it always comes down to that and a different thinking about, your relationship with a subject over time versus that anthropological precision that you're interested in, and my work is like very much related to photography, but I think that there's the difference in motivation becomes really important. The idea of painting that's something that's like, you know, you're going over and over and over and over and over again, not that photography is less labor intensive, like your practice is like deranged and how labor intensive it is, but something, you know, it is by necessity like a composite, and that changes the relationship.
Let's keep moving.
Yep.
I know, let's
I've
just talk
stalled us
about-
out too much on painting.
Let's just talk about painting already.
All right, the next question, where are you from? And does that affect your practice?
See, you say, like, I saw that and I was like, oh, it does. And I never mentioned that in my artist statement, and I really probably should.
You're like, how do I answer no to that question without being a dick?
No, it's true. Like, I'm sorry, I'm the default. I'm a white male, like,
Yeah.
therefore.
Yeah, great, he's a straight painter. What's up, like I answered every one of those wrong.
I
Like,
have
how
no
can it still
identity.
be important?
Yeah.
Just focus on nerd culture.
Yeah, no, that's, mhm.
Just every time someone asks you one of those questions, oh no, but I'm a nerd, so it's okay. Have you heard about this wonderful game called WoW?
You, shots fired, okay. But yeah, I'm thinking about the kind of the possibility of where, you know, I might be from and what that might mean, or how I might be thinking about the work that I'm making because of where I'm from. You know, if I was, you know, from the moon and I had to have paints, and I'm a painter now, that's actually really interesting and important, because I'm from a great barren wasteland.
Right.
And now I have color or something.
All right, move on to the next question. All
This
right.
is a doozy.
Do you work individually? Do you have a community-based practice? Do other factors of your life contribute towards your artist practice?
Do you want me to unpack this a little
Let's take that one at a
bit?
time.
You know, so
You gonna read
these are
these or-
such good questions, but now I have to rewrite everything.
So do you work individually?
I'm in my
First
head
part of
too
the
much.
question.
I also have written many people's art statements, so.
Do you have a community-based practice? And the last part of the question is, do other factors of your life contribute towards your artist practice?
Here's a question. What's an artist practice?
Yeah, I just asked the last question.
You got a voiceover artist over here. All right. So, okay. I make paintings. Obviously, painting falls under the what is an artist practice for me. I also do a lot of other things in my life, like work here. Is that part of my artist practice?
I mean, I think that, so, I mean, this is where it's coming from. That's where the question's coming from, right? Especially for people who work in art spaces, is like my individual artist practice, my studio practice is me alone, preferably alone the entire time. I want no one else involved in my studio practice whatsoever. But it is completely influenced by my social practice, which is community organizing and working in an art space, and like devoting my entire life to helping other people outside of the like 16 hours a week I devote to my studio practice, which is usually just 8 hours or less. So I like, if I just look at, and this is why I asked this question, is because when I look at just my studio practice, it feels like this very kind of like superficial thing where I'm like just sitting at my loom and like making something I think is pretty and maybe has a relevance to other people, but like, I don't know, because I'm alone in my studio and don't show my work to other people. But then when you put it in the greater context of what I'm doing in my life, everything I do in my studio relates to every other aspect of my life and really has a lot, I mean, it's completely influenced by, I mean, being an anarchist, living in Philadelphia, working in community spaces, having a studio practice in Kensington for 7 years, doing harm reduction work in Kensington. And like, my work would not be where it is today if if those other factors didn't exist, you know? And I think that is really important, in my opinion, to look at every aspect of your life. Even if you have a job that doesn't relate to art whatsoever, it probably does. Like, it probably is completely influencing what you do in the studio. Or if you don't work, what you do in your day-to-day outside of the studio completely relates to your studio practice in some way. But I mean, yeah, that's my rant. Did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, the next question is, what are you working towards? That's a very.
Oh my God, that's so hard.
Right. It's a more open-ended question. Okay, what are you working towards?
In what context?
That's all the questions I have.
Okay, so can you hear the bad way of answering? The bad way of answering that?
What are you working towards? $1 million at Miami Art Basel.
Well, let's maybe think about a couple of ways that you could answer it.
Yeah.
Like, whether that's like, I am literally working towards the completion of this like body of work or this project. And that's very granular about how I'm answering that one. Kind of on the flip side of things, like, maybe what I'm working towards is, if it's social work, working in a community, it's, you know, uniting individuals in my community towards, you know, a shared goal, a goal of, you know, equality and justice in my neighborhood. You know, I'm, you know, maybe a little bit more introspective, and what I'm working towards is to like have a really better understanding of, you know, what it means to be a father.
Or what are you know, I'm working towards drawing my viewers' attention to this thing, or, you know, it can also be outer directed as well. It doesn't have to be personal. I'm asking my viewer to engage with this thing about my work, or to consider this, use my work as a vehicle to consider this other thing.
I like that a lot.
So Bill said in the chat, I was told not to talk about volunteer activities, even if they relate to my art life, when he took a paid workshop with an artist.
Give him, Sam, give him.
Well, no, I mean, I already said in the chat that whoever said that is wrong.
Well, there's also taste though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're never gonna please everybody. You're never gonna have the artist statement that everybody's gonna look at and be like.
Oh,
"This is
yeah.
great."
Yeah.
Someone's gonna think you have too much bio in it. Somebody's gonna think it's too dry. Somebody's gonna wish that it were, you know, that it was, had engaged more with theory, and someone else is gonna be like, I see theory and I just throw it in the trash.
I can chime in on that. Like, I worried a lot about that in writing on myself, because I worry about being too Philadelphia and too teacher. Like, those are my two things.
But that's how you
And
got
we
the
were all like,
fellowship.
That's literally all my work is out, but that is like a thought that I have, like, after the project that I'm currently on, which is related to my thesis, becoming a teacher and all that kind of stuff. Like, I definitely think about that as like, how do I, approach like the next body of work in a way that like, do I have to force myself away from that at that point?
No, I think, I personally think invest in whatever feels good for you, you know, like, I don't think, personally, and again, this is all personal opinion. I think changing your practice to suit a residency or suit what shows you see are popular right now is usually the wrong decision, because then you're not actually being true to your practice. So like when I first graduated a couple years ago, 8 years ago, I saw a lot of residencies that had community practices in it, or like doing a workshop and like teaching as part of the residency. And I was like trying to figure out how I would do a workshop and like teach, even though that was like not part, at the time was not part of my practice at all. And it was like, I never got any of them because I think people just could see like, why is this person doing a residency talking about like harm reduction and stuff, but then like teaching a workshop about like indigo dyeing, because that was like the only thing I knew how to do a workshop about, you know? Yeah, I think just being authentic is the right way to go, because like trends change. And I at least in Philly, like social practice work is just getting like more supported and funded as
Yeah, it's
like,
never for like trends, it's for me, it's more just like about like trying to come off in a way that's like not as a great, or not as like, I feel like some teachers who are like artists are like,
Yeah.
like, and I worry that the answers to multiple of the questions that you asked before, I mentioned my students like 4 times. And then I mentioned like Philadelphia like 5 times.
We
And
may
I'm like,
not
you know,
be,
I'm just like, oh God.
we may be the wrong people also to respond to this, because we all were like charmed by the teacheriness. So you say to Philly, to teacher, and you saw 4 people like lurch out of their seat.
It was the way that you talked about being a teacher and your students and what that meant, you know, so I think, it's, so yeah.
But if you're, you know, talk to someone else too, if you're not sure, like talk
She
to
talks
someone.
of like real, like artsy, like high class money people and be like, doing this.
And-
Just to get their reaction.
Right.
Or, I mean, I feel like a way to kind of come at that in a slightly different angle, the way that you, left it before is like, what do you need your, the viewer, the person who's reading this to, understand before they kind of get there?
Yeah.
Or like, what do you need them to suspend, for a moment to get them into your head?
Yeah, that's what I think about when I like, what do I want someone when they look at my artwork to feel? Right? I'm working on a project right now with photos and transparency film and negatives. And it's the idea behind this project is that why I'm using transparency film is because I want people to imagine that they're taking a look at them, right? So just, yeah, thinking about, and sometimes what you want people to get out of your artwork doesn't quite, they might get something else. But that's something to keep in mind, I think, when you are writing about yourself and your artwork, is what do I want people to take away? What do I want people to know about, this art that I created?
Oh, yeah, what's the question?
I know, I just said it's what question am I asking, making, asking you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nishay has a question. Social practice work is getting funding. Teaching is getting funding, but what about the artists that work alone because their art is their way to make sense of the wider world?
I mean, like, we can't control what's on trend, right? Like, as individuals, as curators. And I was just thinking, like, if everybody likes your work and gives you a positive response, it's because you got super lucky and you're like hitting a trend in a moment. Otherwise, like, it's not something to aspire to, because it means that there's like a lack of idiosyncrasy and singularity in your vision, right? Like, if you're not rubbing someone the wrong way, then you're probably not, really be doing something authentic. But sometimes things, there's like a flavor of the moment, and it's like, it's great, and you should like surf that wave, but those waves are like real short,
Yeah.
And I would just maybe ride it out and like be you and be yourself and do your thing. And if you're doing something that's really, if you have this like, solitary monastic practice and it's really beautiful. I mean, like, it's a long game,
Yeah.
I think at that point, you just kind of need to lean into your strengths. So like, if you have a social practice, you're a teacher, you're in the community, you're doing all this work, lean into your strength and like write a grant, you might get one right now.
Yeah.
If you don't have one, maybe don't look at those kinds of grants and maybe start exploring like a residency that allows you to be, the monk in the wilderness, making it art and understanding the world through the distance of the lens that being in the forest in the middle of nowhere provides.
I mean, I would also say we're in a show right now, like what the room we are sitting in is all about just like energy and like the moment and like celebration and like has nothing to do with like a larger like social practice or, I mean, other than, I mean, Ellen documents people, I mean, I think that's like social in terms of like, she's hanging out with people and like, these are people she knows or like lives around in New Orleans, but like, it's also just Ellen and Aaron processing the world around them. So I think that there's always going to be spaces that allow for room for that too. I mean, I'll say for us, there's space here. But I think there's plenty of galleries in Philly that aren't just focused on social practice, but it might seem that way because that's the only thing that gets written about. And we only have
Like two,
yeah, we like art blog, sometimes Title Mag if they feel like writing something. And maybe the Inquirer if they hire someone to do it, like,
Yeah,
and Broad Street Review.
Yeah.
So like, if they don't write about it, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. It's just that it's more interesting to them to have like this longer narrative that they can talk about other than like, oh, I walked into a show and the artist was exploring their feelings and I liked it.
Even showing, like, that's a game, like, you might not show in the city that you live in, because, it might not be kind of the right moment, the right time, the right kind of set of circumstances for that to all coalesce into a show, and like, don't feel the need and pressure for that to like drive what you do, but rather kind of find a way to work out an artistic career that you're wanting to pursue in the way that you can.
That's actually a really good point. And one we will address in a
Yes,
future
I have
meeting about
so many
exhibition.
thoughts. I'm
Same.
ready to stand up on the desk.
Yeah, I feel between the four of us, we know a lot of exhibitions, like applying to exhibitions and grants and residency tips.
Not because we get them all.
Yeah, just like.
That's why you're not getting the award yet.
That's what I wanted to say, like, yeah, it doesn't mean that, for, I can speak for myself, that I've gotten a whole bunch of like grants and fellowships and residencies, it doesn't, it's just, really acquiring this knowledge just through applying, and I just keep applying.
Yeah.
Keep crafting your, your statement, your bio, thinking about who you are as an artist. And without sounding too, I guess, no, someone somewhere on this planet is going to love the work that you do. That's what keeps me confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, and pander to that person.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might just be you for a while,
Right.
until you find that other kind of like soulmate there who loves your art. But until then, do that thing and be that, weird self that like requires you to make that work.
I'll talk about this more when we are in those other conversations, but like I have from an early age accepted that I will be rejected. We will be rejected. And like that's part of the application process and part of like putting ourselves out there as artists is like you're going to get rejected a lot, and it's like okay, and that doesn't mean that you weren't right for that thing. There just was someone else that maybe was a little more complete with their application. Like I've applied to things before that I got rejected to, and the next year I got it, so.
And a lot of the time, like I said, with, thinking about, Untitled Chapter, right? Like, we actually, we've curated shows based on open call entries that we couldn't fit into a show. We could do all of our programming, and it would all be like, incredible, just based on things that we couldn't fit into a show. So like being on the other end of that has definitely given me some perspective. I'm like, oh, this is just like, And it doesn't mean it's not worth trying. I have like a tip that I don't want to let go before we finish. And I was thinking and talking, you talking about your work. You don't mind my sharing, like we had a conversation about your work a couple of days ago, a week ago, 2 months ago, I don't know. And I was talking about some of the things that I saw in your work, and I was like, and this, and also this, and oh my gosh, and it reminds me of this, and I feel like I had so much to say about the body of work that you were showing me, and I could never generate that kind of enthusiasm for my own work.
Yeah.
It is so helpful. I have a friend I was texting with today, who's let's swap. I'm gonna write your application for the thing and you write mine. I was like, you know what? It is so helpful to have someone else tell you what they see. And there's, if they see it and you want to take it and, it doesn't, nobody's gonna like test you to see where you got your insights from,
That's a really good point, Mary. Even with applications where it's like, this happened to me this week too, that we were applying for a grant for here.
Mhm.
And I just was like really stuck. There was a question that was like, who is your audience? How do you get your audience? And I was like, everyone who's like 5 to 100, like, I don't know. And I had said to my partner, who's also an artist that helps Frank and still work, I have no idea how to answer this. And I said it to him and he had like this beautiful, eloquent thing about like how we connect all these different people from like different parts of Philly and like the surrounding area. And I was like, wow, I'm so glad that you know how to do my job and I don't. Because like sometimes you're too close to it,
Yeah.
My husband's a lawyer and there are like phrases in my artist statement that he came up with like from 10 years ago that I will never let go. Because I was like, that's exactly, like, I
Yeah.
can't improve on this, And again, like, there's no, plagiarism test.
Well, I think that's like a good advertisement opportunity for us. We have a new monthly discussion group called In Review that's like the last week of the month of each exhibition being up. And we have one coming up, I think on the 27th. I might be wrong about the date. It's the last
Yeah, it's
Sunday.
the 27th.
Okay. On the 27th, it's from 12 to 2. Anyway, in the conversation, we'll just be discussing the work that's up. Sydney, who is our resident artist this month, if they want to open they're in the chat, that's why I'm like, if they want to have people talk about their work too, we'll have the residency space open, and we're doing that every month. And I think that's a really good opportunity, not just to give the artists who are on view or in residence feedback about their work, but also being able to write about our own work better, because we do pull out these like beautiful sentences about other people's work sometimes and have like no idea of how to do that when we're writing about our own. So like embracing that as a thing that we do and practice on a consistent basis within group settings, I think is a really good opportunity for like our individual studio practice.
Yeah.
Because it is like a huge part of our studio practice that we all want to avoid is actually writing about our work. Which is our last question, is what is your artist practice? Or what does your artist practice consist of? Which is the same thing, is what is your artist practice? So like the obvious of making work, but also what are all the other components of that practice? Like how often do you clean your studio? How do you organize your work? Do you have a method of shipping your work that you prefer? How do you write about your work? How often do you research exhibition opportunities or grant opportunities? Like those are all the things that feed our practice, not just sitting at our studio trying to think about work to make or actually making.
For me, it's time commitment.
Yeah.
Time management. So as a parent and a spouse, I have maybe an hour sometimes just to do something. And so I use it, so with that in mind, I'm like, oh, what can I do in an hour towards my practice? And so that kind of also shapes or influences my practice. Definitely is like, how much time do I have to do this? So I started doing art when my daughter was very young. And mostly I had to have, she did art with me. And like, so it was like this collaborative thing. I'm like, oh, collage, kids can do collage. And so that's how I kind of got into doing collage, was with my daughter. And I needed to create something. And so, yeah, that's part of my art practice.
And some things will definitely be like relevant to you that aren't relevant for me.
Totally.
Both, might do them. And so like cleaning my studio, definitely not for me. But, like, I feel like if I want to say that like Dungeons and Dragons is like formative to my painting practice, like I can make that argument if
Oh,
I
I
needed
mean,
to.
Colin does. My partner does that, where like he'll just be sitting in front of the TV for 5 hours, and I'm like, why are you always just watching TV? And he's like, this is my artist practice. Because he makes work that has cartoon stuff in it, you know. Sorry to interrupt you, Mary.
I want to read an artist statement that's all about cleaning products and Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, if we ever have a dual artist statement, I guess you'll find out. Yeah, and that was actually something I think about a lot that I learned in college was self-care, which I think we are going to probably have a workshop just about self-care, but like self-care in terms of like I said earlier, I do fiber processes. So like I weave a lot, and you can start having like arthritis and other issues with your body from weaving. So like you have to remember to get up every like hour and a half and move your body and do specific stretches to not start having like long-term health issues. And then that's the same thing with like the fibers itself can get lodged into your lungs, and you get black lung essentially from weaving, which it seems like such a natural process, but only if you're taking care of it and not getting piles of wool build up on the floor around your loom that you're then inhaling every time you move. So it's like thinking about things like that too, where it's like you can be doing a practice that seems like it's non-toxic and safe and fine, but like, have you read what is in your glue? Or like, is your ventilation okay? And like, for me, that is a part of my practice, and I hope more people start thinking about that.
I'm super excited to do a conversation on like self-care and sort of making a sustainable practice. It's really under recognized as part of, shaping a career.
Yeah, we were
Besides
thinking
to
maybe,
herself.
we were thinking maybe in April, because we have the sustainability festival in April, so
Yeah.
maybe, this is not a definite, because we haven't talked about it, past me and Brian being like, oh, that'd be cool.
How many festivals do you have in April?
We have a whole month of the sustainability festival, so it's basically every day we are open, we have an event.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's gonna be very fun, everyone attend. Bill said, are these questions to answer in the artist statement, or are they prompts for the mind mapping? They can be both.
I think one leads to the other, right?
Yeah. I think oh, I was just gonna say, I think if you're stuck, it's like a good place to start.
What a mind map?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know we talked about that, is a mind map or a concept map is literally how it sounds. And you build from it.
Yeah.
So what some people are visual thinkers, and that's how they, in terms of logic. Yeah.
So like you put in a diagram, like
Yeah.
you have an idea and you go.
Right, yeah, you build from that. So And another thing, so I'm an introverted person, and so I don't always like to interact with others. It can be kind of daunting to like share your work with someone, but just ask a friend or somebody you know. I think peer reviews are also a good strategy. So after you write your, first draft of your artist statement, have somebody read it and give you feedback.
And also, I would also say have a non-artist read it,
Yeah,
who you respect, and get their feedback as well.
yeah. I think that's really important to do. I have a friend, V, they're a writer and an editor, and yeah, I think it's helpful to have someone who's not, either in the same practice you are or not an artist. So look at it.
Absolutely. So I think we're nearing the end of our program. And so one, I want to thank everyone for coming out and tuning in at home.
Thank you for dealing with us, everyone who was here at the beginning of the video, because we did not know what we were doing, but it ended up, oh, and now the camera somehow turned off.
Perfect.
Yeah, clearly we still don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
But thank you for coming. This has been fun. Oh, I guess my phone died, maybe.
Yep, that'll do it.
It's just a pleasure to take this moment. Like, talking. I've been like looking at this culture. I don't know.
No, we haven't, but we will announce it soon. Yeah, my phone died.
Yeah.
I guess we have an hour and a half of knowing my phone works.
Plug it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we still on?
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
we should
technically.
Probably,
Yeah, I just pinned the camera.
okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to turn the Zoom off now.